Okay, Stallion. First thing I do when I wake up, I pick up my phone and I go through a series of events, typically covering what has happened over the night and what's potentially about to happen today. For better or for worse, that's what I do every single time. I want you to kind of give me some insight around this artificial intelligence that exists out there. Good, bad? What's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not an expert in any of this, but I think it's wise for us to talk about some of the timely applications that we are hearing about and or personally implementing, because I think that's how you can now apply it to your business, to your own financial freedom journey, and maybe learn from what we've already done. I can't, there's so much out there that I don't know, but what I do know, I'm willing to share. And it starts with, I'm going to kind of lump it in with technology and AI. Okay. So you guys have heard us on the podcast talk about the vending machine business. And Russ and I, we hear about it. We're like, this is genius. This unattended retail space is using AI cameras in the vending machines so that you can literally tap your card, open the door, and start taking out whatever you want. And the AI cameras pick you up and charge your card for whatever was taken. Number one, that all immediately allows people to have less friction in the buying process, which means what? They're going to spend more every time they visit one of these vending machines. Number two, the technology behind that frees us up to not have to physically go by each location to know what is in inventory in those machines. So now all of a sudden, the business that was very physically taxing in the past has become something you manage from your phone. Literally, it tells you when you're low on Snicker bars in vending machine number one or low on energy drinks in vending machine number two. And then subsequently, you can take the technology that is in addition to that, and you can hire contract workers like Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and Uber Eats and drive them to, or allow them to help you go and fill up your vending machine. So you've effectively got a very hands-off business that can be done with technology.
What's the most important resource that you have? If you really thought about this deeply, I think you'd come to the same conclusion that Joey and I did. It's time. In our newest book, What's Without Wall Street, The 3 Steps to Financial Freedom Through Passive Income, we talk about how are we tracking that time? What is the thing that we can do to get more of that time back?
That's right. If you've ever been listening to our podcast and thought, man, it would be amazing if I could take all the things that you guys have learned over the last 10 years and just summarize them, put them in some way to easily digest them and take action, that's what this book is all about. You're not going to want to miss it. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/new book and get your copy today. One thing that I'll add to that is what just happened yesterday. Yesterday, using technology, I went online and Russ and I formed an LLC with TribeVest. Literally in seconds, I had the filing at the Secretary of State website initiated. We had the name confirmed that it was available, and we created an operating agreement for our new business. I then initiated that process so that I can now start a bank account for us, again, without ever going into a bank, which is the biggest, best news of all time. If you've ever been in Wells Fargo, you know what I'm talking about. And then right after that, I bought a website that now I bought the URL from GoDaddy, and it immediately gave me an upgrade option that said to buy it with an email address and a website builder. Well, Russ, I'm not the most technical person in the world, but just based on the name of the website, the AI behind GoDaddy created a one-page website complete with pictures, copy, logos, and everything. It even created 4 different logo options for me to choose from for the new business. We're talking in seconds. So literally on yesterday, I created the company. I went online, bought the website, or created the website, created a logo, And I was able to then go take the contract template from our vendingpreneur course that we bought and submit a contract proposal to one of the first locations that we visited last Wednesday. This is within like a couple of hours. That is the power of AI. Right now, AI and technology combined, right? Those things were immediate applications that I wanted to share. And then two other quick things.
Hold on really quick. I just recapping that. You started and built a business within 2 hours.
Yes.
All using AI technology to make it happen.
Yeah. All the things that would have taken weeks. If you've ever done this in the past, yeah, potentially months. And if you have multiple partners, like going into a physical bank with all those partners, I've had to do that before. It is no fun. It's very difficult to get busy people to do something like that. All this within a couple hours. Okay, so second application. We have a friend who loaded their best emails into a chatbot. And this is their best performing emails. Like they've tracked over the years, these ones, convert at the highest amount. They have the biggest number of opens, whatever you want to, whatever you're tracking as far as performance. Took those 50 best emails, loaded them into a bot, and now he prompts the bot to write in his voice as essentially his own copywriter, saving hours. I'm talking hours and hours each week to write the emails that he would normally have to do himself or hire out to a copywriter. Well, if you're listening to this, you have a business and you've been paying for that service, you now have the ability to easily replace that with just using the content that you already have. Now, if you don't have your own content, it's going to be more difficult because it has to be able to, it has to learn from you before it can actually act on your behalf. But that's a pretty amazing piece of technology. And then the last is you'll notice on our website, wealthwithoutwallstreet.com, in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to meet Wally, our new bot, who has learned from all of our podcasts, all of our webinars, all of our YouTube videos and things that we've loaded into him that you can now ask him anything and he will answer in our voice, referencing the location in which he pulled the data from. So no longer are you having to go searching through all of the millions of different things that we have created over the years. You now can go direct to the thing that you're looking for within seconds. And that to me is really, really cool. It's exciting and allows you to be more efficient with your time.
Yeah. Whether you want to learn about how to build and create passive income streams, you want to understand what are the 5 pillars of Wealth Without Wall Street. If you want to understand your current financial situation and identify areas for improvement, Wally's there to help you. If you want to ask questions about infinite banking without even having to talk to one of the strategic IBC coaches, you can start. Wally can help answer questions. I mean, this is fantastic. I love it. Before you know it, he's going to be taking over my job as podcast host. I'm sure he'll do a much better job because he will be able to enunciate the words and actually read them as they are written.
I want to add on to the AI because I think there's a broader opportunity here, which is a lot of times new things can seem uncomfortable and daunting, and people want to push away from something that's new because they don't understand it. And that usually is a symptom of just fear and lack of, really deciphering what's going on. Look no further back in time than Eastman Kodak. Kodak, for those of you that are old enough, was the preeminent camera company in the world. But when digital cards came out for digital memory for cameras, Kodak made a very calculated decision that they were not going to get into the digital space because they said people don't want digital pictures, people want real pictures. So we're going to hitch our wagon to this and ride it off into the sunset. And instead they rode it into the ground. Mm. So if you're not willing to explore these new technologies such as AI, I'm not saying that everything is good, but you've got to explore it because there might be an application for it in your world. And it might be the thing that keeps your business going while the other ones go under.
I think I heard that, Reed Hastings and his partner, Mark Randolph, went into the CEO president's office of Blockbuster pitching this small idea called Netflix. And we're trying to help Blockbuster get something similar off the ground. If you remember, Blockbuster had tried to start doing something where they were, like sending out DVDs and getting it back, but it was really clunky. It wasn't really good. And they were like, no, we've got this idea where it's going to be digital. People are going to be able to access all of these movies online. And the story I hear is that the CEO of Blockbuster is like, naysay this saying. It's like, I tell you what, if you guys get big enough, at some point, we'll just buy you. and then we'll take it over at that point in time. So I think many people know now the story of Netflix, and most younger generations don't even know who Blockbuster is. David, any parting shots on AI?
I just how far we've come in such a short period of time. It just seems like, AI has been around 18 months, maybe 24 months on the long end, right? And now all of the things that we're able to do, and all of I personally was using it the other day just to create, a document. I needed to create a non-disclosure agreement, right? And in the past, I probably would have gone to Google and, found some company and paid a fee for a template or something like that. And I was able to just use AI and tell it what I wanted. And it literally created a document in minutes and allowed me then a framework to then start building on and tweaking. So I don't know anything about it. I'm just scratching the surface on what my knowledge of it is, but I'm excited about the future and what it holds and how it's going to make our jobs so much easier going forward.
Yeah. Obviously, just like any technology, we need to understand how to use it. I think there's going to be industries that are going to be built specifically on how to teach people like you and me how to do it. Our kids and grandkids are going to grow up with it. They're just going to know it. And it's learning, right? We heard it said at an event we were at earlier in the year that it's kind of where the Apple One phone was, right? It's still in beta mode, even though it has, hundreds and hundreds of millions of users on it. It's still in beta mode, but it will excel over the next 12 months. The pace in which it took the iPhone to go from Gen 1 to whatever we're at now, 15 or 16. All right, let's move on to the second topic, kind of current event. This is something that impacts us in lots of ways. I think it's the Federal Reserve is going to meet 3 more times for the end of the year. There's a lot of expectation right now that we're going to see potentially the first rate cut in the last 18 months. If you know anything about the markets, you know that we sat at an interest rate around 0 for a number of years, and it has gone up, 525 basis points, 550 basis points. And it's caused a lot of the things that we purchased to be more expensive as a result. And I think we need to talk about what impacts that has, because when financial freedom is measured by passive income being greater than monthly expenses, then one of the items, if we have variable debt out there or debt that we may accrue at some point, the cost of it is mostly directly related to some of these changes. Now, Sally, I don't know if you know this, but the Federal Reserve Bank does not dictate the price of mortgage interest rates, nor do they dictate the price of your credit card, but they are correlated. There are connections, right? So the Federal Reserve rate typically sits at 3% less than prime. I don't know if you guys knew that. So right now, when you see that prime rate is a rate that the largest financial institutions will charge their best customers. Nelson Nash used to have a saying, I'm not prime. I don't know anybody else is. I had to pay a point to 1.5 above prime to get access to money. So for anybody who've got lines of credit out there, you probably are paying prime plus 1.5, which is right now sitting somewhere around 9.5%. So if we see the Fed funds rate drop by a quarter point, here, we should see our prime rate come down by a quarter of a point. And in essence, then our monthly expenses are going to come down. Now, David, you and Joey sat in the mortgage world, as you know, because I'm sure you guys were asked these questions all the time as it relates to interest rates. What's going to happen with interest rates on my mortgage? Well, they're dealing with long-term bonds, right? So when we look at what is happening as the Fed funds rate drops, that's the rate that banks charge other banks when they need access to money overnight, right? And so the higher the cost to do business, the more they charge for other things, in addition to the savings accounts that they maybe give you interest on, right? So when you see interest rates higher, one of the things that's connected to this is the 10-year Treasury bond. And so what we're seeing now is that the Treasury bonds have significantly been on the decline for the last probably 3 to 4 months. Hence the reason, if you're watching in the news, you probably see people talking about mortgage rates coming down. They're hoping that's going to spur on some more purchasing in the real estate market. And Mark, just for a guy that has a house on the market, I'm hoping that's true. you know, but we also know that that's a longer term trend, that those interest rates move slowly. So even with the Fed funds rate dropping, we still won't necessarily experience a lot of drop in our 30-year mortgage rates, but we might as time goes on, as it depends on what happens with some of those things. Lastly, I'll bring up this point. Since we're big proponents of using life insurance, and that's where we're storing our capital, we've experienced the blessing of higher interest rates because our insurance companies, they're the largest purchaser of corporate bonds out there. On average, 75% of their portfolio consists of bonds. Somewhere between 45 to 50% of those bonds are corporate bonds, right? So we've experienced higher yields on those bonds over the last couple of years, and that helps us in the form of a dividend. So, you know, if you're participating in the infinite banking concept, you're also getting the blessing of higher interest rates, which is something that we've needed. We've needed an influx of capital into there after such low interest rates for such a long period of time. So I would see that, you know, yes, whenever we see interest rates slowly start to come down, that will be a blessing on one side, but it'll be also for us who are storing capital in our insurance companies. Our dividends won't continue to rise at the same level because they will be impacted by, you know, lower yields on the bonds that they start buying in years to come. Any thoughts around that, David?
Yeah, and for those that are watching to see the mortgage rates drop, a lot of times it's already baked in, right? And so whatever happens on that day may have very little impact, right? Positively or negatively. So, you know, but the fact that interest rates have gone up the way they have over the last 24 months has really made it, the affordability of housing, really a big challenge for a lot of people with inflation, with the strain on their earnings and those dollars for other things. It's also made buying a home even more difficult. So it's just a challenge, right?
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Mark, what about for you?
I think it's also an opportunity, because imagine if you can get into a piece of property, right? So again, everything's got to line up. And if you find a property that you like and it's one that you actually want, yes, the interest rate is high. Yes, the monthly expenditure is going to be high. However, if those rates do come down, you can refi the rate. You cannot refi or rebuy at a different purchase price. That's just not going to happen. And so once you get in, you know what your expense for the home is, but you may have the opportunity. Now, I'm not saying to buy a house just because you're rolling the dice on the rate coming down later on and you can refi it. If you need to get a house, you have to get a house. You do what you have to do, but know that there is that opportunity for you, right? And I think that's what we're talking about here is, hey, there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. There's going to be pros. There's going to be cons, but this could be a pro of when everyone else is sitting on the sidelines, not willing to jump in. That might be one of your most powerful moments to jump in, Because think of the leverage, right? The market is tight because nobody is, well, not nobody, sorry, that's a strong word. There's a lot of people who are not willing to sell because they know they can't get into something that they want at a price point that they can do. So that leaves inventory off to the side. With a lack of inventory, that's still pushing the home prices up because the inventory that's there is now in demand. But there's also a counter pressure of the higher price point to get in. And so I talked to one of my friends, goes to church, and he's also at the same gym. And I said, hey, rates coming down, possibly. What is your thought based on your historical track record? Do you think it's going to be a net positive, net negative? And he goes, well, I'm hoping it'll get some people off the sidelines. I'm hoping it'll get some inventory out there. But again, you never know, right? So if the rate comes down, now the affordability is in your favor, which means what? You can afford more house, which is what we saw with the uber low interest rates that just pushed home prices up to astronomical levels. So everything's like a seesaw. There's no clear-cut winner or loser in it.
Well, I think also one of the opportunities that exist, and we heard from one of our guests, David, when we were in Nashville at that Apex coaching event, where it was the seller finance opportunity exists right now, where there's lots of people who aren't selling because they aren't getting the price that they want. But if you can come in with a creative way of purchasing it, you can give them the price that they want as long as they give it to you on your terms. And to your point, Mark, the opportunity may be greater now to buy because there's fewer people out there doing it. A year and a half, 2 years ago, everybody watching HGTV was trying to buy houses and flip them, right? Like everybody was trying to become a short-term rental operator. And the housing prices continued to skyrocket because we had cheap money and we had a lot of motivated people and a lot of people with a lot of money in their pocket because the government shelled out so much money, especially to small business owners, that they were like, what am I going to do with it? I guess I'm going to become a real estate guru. Well, I think now a lot of that's dried up. And so those who are willing to kind of roll up their sleeves and do some of the heavy lifting, I think have access to a lot of opportunities to buy houses and then use your strategy, Mark. Well, one, I can get it maybe at zero interest. I could buy a property, at 0% interest if it's 100% seller finance, especially when you're buying homes that are already paid off. I don't have to go get a mortgage. And if I'm using it as an investment deal, I can then turn around and seller finance to somebody else and earn a good return on top of that money. So there's lots of options for those who want to be able to do that thing. All right, David, I want to kind of come to you. Let's talk about a little bit of volatility and what are you seeing out there?
Well, when you came up with the idea of this podcast and talking about current events, I really just started being more diligent and paying attention to what was going on out there. And I started gathering, articles that I was seeing and I'm just seeing a lot of anxiety in the market, right? In fact, I found an article from CNBC that talked about how 77% of Americans report feeling anxious about their financial situation. It's like, golly, 77%. That's like 3 out of 4 people, right? I mean, look to your left, look to your right. I mean, yeah, it's all around us, right? The article also said that 58% feel that finances control their lives. So, they're not in control, their finances are in control, right? That's not a good situation to be in, right? And then it also went on to say that 52% have difficulty controlling the money related worries. So, and I thought about that. I was like, golly, here we are in our world. We talk about having a passive income operating system, almost an automated way to move money from the active side of the fence to the passive side of the fence. And the way that's all set up with a personal P&L and a balance sheet and a holding place for all of our capital. And we don't necessarily worry about those things. I know I don't. I used to worry about all these things all the time. When I read the article, it reminded me of who I was just a few years ago before I started practicing some of the things that we talk about day in and day out. And I can remember thinking about how the market was up and how it was down and how that was impacting monies that I had in my qualified plans that I had no control over, right? I just had to ride it out like a roller coaster. And I'm not a big fan of roller coasters, right? The older I get, the more they make me sick, right? And so I just remember when I sold, or when I closed that last qualified plan and removed all that money from the market, I no longer had market worries. I didn't even think about the market anymore, right? But to go on, there was another article written by U.S. News and World Report, and the title of the article was, "Will the stock market crash in 2024? 7 key factors that you should pay attention to." And I thought to myself, good Lord, 7 things that I have to pay attention to? The job market, the Federal Reserve. You just talked about the Federal Reserve, Russ, right? Growth expectations versus risk, right? Volatility scares, right? Stubborn inflation, investor sentiment. I can't even talk. Negative economic data. And I thought to myself, where in the world do I have any control over any of that stuff? I'm supposed to pay attention to these 7 key factors to figure out if the stock market's going to crash this year. It's just overwhelming. And I understand how people can just feel, like there's a weight of the world sitting on them, right? So anyways, I thought it was really interesting that there's just a lot of anxiety out there. 77% is just a high number. You know what their solution was? You'll love this. Their solution was to have less stress, right? Is to create big goals. That sounds like familiar, right? To share your goals with others. Sounds like an accountability group, right? And to take action. And I thought, man, what have we been preaching all these years, Russ? Right? Get a vision, right? Get a vision for what financial freedom looks like for you. Get in a community of like-minded people and share that vision with others, right? And learn and take action, right? We have strategic IBC that helps people with their passive income operating system, right? We have Apex that helps people build a plan and follow a path, right? I felt like, man, it's just, we have the solution to what the world needs. And it just reinforced everything that we do, or how I feel about what we do. So, man.
Speaking of current events,
there's a new book.
There's a book out there that was written, and it's called Wealth Without Wall Street: 3 Steps to Freedom Through Passive Income. And step 1 is have a goal and a vision. Step 2 is build a plan and a pathway to get there. Step 3 is get the support needed and the accountability so that you don't stop short of your goals. You don't fall short in the last mile, right? I mean, hey, the only anxiety was me having to read that book for Audible. It was really difficult. But outside of that, the steps are pretty simple. And if you follow and do the hard work, you can receive a lot of stress-free relaxation. I mean, Mark, you're a great example. There's a reason why we say you're the retiree of the group. Anxiety seems to be a little bit less whenever you've got this passive income thing figured out, huh?
Yeah, especially when you get invitations at the last minute to go fishing. So, I mean, it's good stuff. Because if I was working my airline job, I probably wouldn't be here. Probably wouldn't have that opportunity to say, well, I guess I'll power down after this podcast and go hop on the water and see if we can pull in some silver salmon.
Well, speaking of silver salmon, let's move on to the election. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on there and your take on it.
Are you referring to trying to swim against the stream, Russ? Is there some challenge there? Yeah. Elections, gang, they come around all the time. And no matter what you do, it's happening. And so similar to David's thing, I actually did a Google search too, because I thought it'd be interesting, election fears, election anxiety. And it had a multitude of lists of the top 7 things that are concerning people with elections, the top 10, the top 12 ways to manage and whatnot. And ultimately what it broke down is, it's fear of the uncontrollable, right? Why do people in the back of an airplane get white knuckled? Well, some people have a fear of flying, but that fear is probably rooted in they don't know what's going on. They're not in control. I mean, when you're sitting up at the front of the jet, and you're going through turbulence, yeah, it's a bummer. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but I'm in control of the airplane, not of the weather, not of the environment, but I can start to make moves based on the information that I get. So controlling what you can, right? I can't control where the thunderstorm's at, but I can drive around it. I can choose not to go into that thunderstorm, which is probably a really good idea. Transport jets are not supposed to fly through thunderstorms. But what about the other part too, right? Is before that plane left the gate, if we're going to stick with the airplane analogy, you had to come up with contingency plans. So preparing for the worst so that you only know the best, right? If you already have a backup plan in place, if something goes awry, if certain bills and legislation are passed, which could be detrimental to you, right? Russ, we were talking the other day about one of our members who there is talk of tariffs, right? Import taxes that are going to happen. And this person is already thinking about it, already planning, and already coming up with ways to mitigate that, quote, potential burden. And that's what this is about, right? If you know what's going on, you're going to know what to do. You can sit there and throw your head in the sand and think, well, I just don't want to know about it, don't want to hear about it, but it's still there. So we need to understand what's happening so we know what to do. Retirement accounts, right? Elections bring a lot of volatility in the market. David was just talking about that. The market is trying to price certain things in. If they think one candidate may do certain things that would be beneficial to them, that may cause the market to rise. If they believe another candidate's going to get in that's going to do something detrimental, that may cause a pullback. That then also translates down into the workforce. Maybe there's some hiring freezes. Maybe there's some layoffs. Maybe there's some job movement, right? These are all things that could happen from an election. It could also be a boon, right? Where all of a sudden now there's hiring, or there could be contraction. Consumer confidence. Well, if you think your job might be on the line, do you think you're going to go out and keep spending like you have been at Amazon? Probably not. You're probably going to start cutting back, right? Hey, maybe we need to ditch a couple of these subscriptions. Maybe we don't need to watch 6 streaming services at night. Maybe we don't need certain other subscriptions. Hey, maybe we don't need to go out to dinner. So all of a sudden discretionary spending starts cutting back. And what does that do? That impacts those businesses. So everything starts trickling, and we are all interconnected in some way, shape, or form to that, which then leads to investment decisions. If you are an investor and you are making decisions based on short-term movements or what you think the election is going to yield, you may be putting yourself in a really uncomfortable spot, because you got to think long-term, right? These are some long-term plays. Yes, there are short-term moves, but if you stick with your long-term vision, if we go back to that book you were holding up, Russ, I think I might have seen it once or twice, Building a Plan. You notice it didn't say setting a goal based on who's in office during these 4 years. So you're setting the goal that you want. These other things are going to happen. Storms are going to come through, right? Drought, famine, flood, hurricanes, natural disasters, other tragedies can befall, things outside of our control. But that shouldn't have a major impact on your goal. And if you know where you want to get to, then you know the steps you need to take to get there. Just like that plane departing from one point trying to get to another. We're expecting clear skies, but even if there's thunderstorms, well, we still know where we're supposed to get to. So we just have to make some changes along the way to get there. So as my dad said, I'll finish with this one. When he was flying with one of his young co-pilots, and the co-pilot was looking at buying a house, right? So he's worried, he's nervous, he's got a wife, he's got a kid on the way, and he's like, we want to get a house, we want to be able to build our family inside of that house, but I'm worried. My dad said, okay, worried about what? Well, Vietnam's still going on, so I'm afraid I might get deployed. It's like, okay, airline's having trouble, I'm afraid I might get furloughed. My wife's job, this, that, the other, that, all these reasons not to do it. And my dad said, those are all valid reasons, but there will always be reasons not to buy that house. You just have to find enough reasons to buy that house. And I think that's going to hold for whoever's in office. There's always going to be things that you don't like about them. You just got to find enough things that are moving in your direction so you can keep pushing towards that goal that you set for yourself.
So good, man. I gave you the probably the hardest one to cover, the election process, because we could have went down a lot of roads, right? There's a lot of comments that are being posted out there, depending on what side you're listening to. And my guess is if you're listening to this podcast, I can probably guess what side you're listening to. But well done. David, any thoughts from the election side?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm sitting here listening to Mark thinking, where are the opportunities, right? I think to your last example there, Mark, I think for a lot of people, it's that scarcity mindset. It's like, I'm going to have to bootstrap this thing for the next 4 years, depending on whether my candidate gets in or not, right? But the reality is, and we all know this, right? The wealthy make money in all types of markets, and whoever's in office, right? And so I'm challenged now and encouraged to have a mindset of where are the opportunities, right? There's going to be opportunities regardless, right? And how do we keep our eyes open, our ears tuned, and ready to seize those opportunities when they present themselves?
Well, the current events impact us individually, and we need to apply those in our scenario, but stay focused on the things that matter that are going to help us. Because right now, people are distracted more than ever. And remember, we're competing against them. At some level, we're competing against them. And the mistakes they're making or the deals they're not doing are creating opportunities for us. If we don't get distracted by what's happening out there, we do listen, so we know enough to figure out where the puck's going, right? No matter who's in office, there will be decisions that they will make. We need to be listening to those decisions, figuring out, which candidate is interested in promoting up which industry. How can we connect our opportunities connected into those industries? But I think that we have opportunity in front of us. Keep focused on the things we're doing. Remember, financial freedom is when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. Don't forget that point. Apply all decision-making through that framework, and you will get closer to, not further from, financial freedom. Mark, David, thank you so much. Joey, who bailed out of here a second ago on his way across the pond, thank you for listening. Hope you have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.